On today's episode of Wrestling Changed My Life.
When you're on that mat, when it's you against the other person, I think you have to own up and take responsibilities for your wins and your losses.
We can endure anything and adapt and pivot and change. Wrestling gave us that ability.
I would say nothing in life has impacted me more than the things wrestling has taught me in terms of self-reflection, resilience.
Toughness. Some guys have it, some guys don't.
Adversity, 100%. How to pick myself up and be a man after I failed.
And everything that has shaped my life and where I'm at today would not be there without the values and basically the lessons I've learned through the sport of wrestling.
For me, wrestling saved my life because it allowed me to focus and channel my energy.
We're fortunate if you wrestled, because if you wrestled, natural talent helps, but it's 5% of the ingredient. It pales in comparison to heart and technique and effort.
It humbled me, taught me humility. Nothing can humble you more than wrestling. I think it's the learning to adapt, right? You learn how to adapt, you learn how to solve problems.
You know, if I look back at my time I spent wrestling, if it gave me one thing more than anything else, it's mental toughness.
What's going on, friends? You're listening to Wrestling Changed My Life. This is your host, Ryan Warner. Thank you for tuning in. You picked a good one, because my guest today is Bruce Baumgartner, one of the most decorated wrestlers of all time of any country. And here's why. 13-time world medalist. He was a 5-time world champ, 3 world champs, and 2 Olympic gold medals. And not only that, he got silver 4 times. So we're talking 9 times. This guy was in the world finals. And then to top it off, he wrestled in 4 Olympics and went 17 years without losing to an American. Woo! Bruce, you are the man, sir, and it was an honor to talk to you. We chatted about his friendship with Dave Schultz, some unlikely encounters with the great Larry Bird, and then dive into his rivalry with the Soviet Union's David Gobedjishvili. They wrestled 16 times and had some absolute battles, so we talk about that. Fan of the Week goes to Jack LaCroix, one of our younger listeners, 8-year-old fan up in Bagley, Minnesota. He's a diehard Gopher fan, and from what I hear, Jack listens to the podcast before he tucks it in for bed every night, so it means I need to clean up my language a little bit. Sorry about that, Jack. Sometimes I let a few curse words slip out just because I'm getting so excited. I'm told Jack's favorite wrestler is Mitch McKee, so Mitch, if you're listening, we got to get you on the show for our good friend Jack. And folks, if you see him out there wrestling this winter up in the Minnesota circuit, give him the old Wrestling Changed My Life salute. Jack, thank you for listening, my friend. Means a lot, and we'll do everything we can to get Mitch McKee on for you. Last but not least, as you know, I've been talking about it for months. The Dan Gable documentary is finally coming out on Monday, November 18th. It's a podcast documentary that I produced and directed. Because I'm blue in the face from talking about it, I just want to give you a little tidbit, a little teaser. So here's the opening sequence from the documentary.
Wrestling for Dan Gable, he was the best.
Here's Dan Gable, the Iowa coach.
And he took care of us in a way that made us accountable and made us fight, and more importantly, made us want to fight for him.
And look at that Iowa man. There's Dan Gable.
I was born to be a coach, you know.
Iowa has already clinched the team championship. They had done so.
There's only one Dan Gable. I maintain Dan Gable is the greatest motivator in the history of college sports.
You can see Dan Gable and crew are very excited, really. Very intense, but he's got to be happy with the way the Hawks have gone.
And so all these guys that won for me, wow. It's like it overwhelmed me for satisfaction.
Booker's in serious trouble here. Booker's in serious trouble.
For the University of Iowa, it was a tremendous day. They wrapped up the team title, the NCAA Wrestling Championships, before the finals began.
As you can tell, very exciting. I'm excited, at least. I hope you are as well. Now, let's not delay this any further. Let's get to the interview with Bruce. Give it up for Bruce Baumgartner. All right, we're here at Bruce Baumgartner. Bruce, welcome to the podcast.
Ryan, it's a pleasure to be here.
It's an honor to have you, sir. One of the great all-time wrestlers of any country. I thought we'd start, though, Bruce, with one of the things I found really interesting is in the 96 Olympics, you were essentially the team captain for all Team USA. How many people were watching you when you walked in the arena in Atlanta in 96 carrying the U.S. flag?
Well, Ryan, I don't know exactly how many people were watching. I can tell you it felt like the entire world. That was just such a great honor, being elected captain of the U.S. wrestling team, and then on top of that, all the captains of the different teams in different sports, voted me to carry the flag, and that was sort of the symbolic captain of the entire U.S. Olympic team. And then Teresa Edwards, she was kind of did the athlete's oath, which was kind of the women's basketball player that was, I don't know if it would be called co-captain or one of the captains also, but coming over the ramp down in the Olympic Stadium in Atlanta was just, there were close to, I think, 100,000 people watching. Between 80 and 100,000 people were there. You couldn't even hear yourself speak. I mean, I was trying to yell to the person next to me, and you couldn't even hear it. And I will tell you this, I was really, really nervous, with all those people watching. And somebody said at the time, and I don't know if that changed at all or not, but at the time, that was one of the most highly watched Olympic broadcasts ever, the opening ceremonies in Atlanta. And I don't know if that's true or not, but, I don't know how many people watched it on television.
I think you said, or I heard somewhere in an interview, it was maybe 1 billion. I don't know if that's exaggerating.
Yeah,
but...
I mean, the rumor, and again, you don't have any statistics on this, but somebody said on that opening ceremonies, they were estimating somewhere 1 billion people watched it, or over 1 billion people watched it. So, and again, I don't know, how do you go? I didn't count household to household. I'd still be counting, but,
yeah.
That's what people said. And I'm not sure how many people were in the stadium, but I know one thing, there wasn't one empty seat.
Wow. I mean, and the fact that it was in the United States had to make it even that much more special. Did you have any family in the arena that night, or were they all watching from home?
No, I had my I forget if my mom and dad were there. I know my wife was there for sure. Linda was there, and it was just an unbelievable time. And sitting back, we actually sat in another stadium, and the home team goes in last, so we were there, and people say, "Oh, the opening ceremonies was so cool on watching it, and it was great pageantry." And we basically watched it on a big screen on another stadium, across the way, because the home team goes in last, so we missed a lot of the pageantry, or most of the pageantry, in speeches live. I mean, we walked in, and probably 15, 20 minutes, a half an hour later, it was over. But it was just an awesome honor, and just representing our country, and the symbol of our great country, the flag, it was just unbelievable.
Unreal. Yeah, it's what a cool thing for wrestling, and for you personally, obviously. And if we go way back to New Jersey in your early years, I read somewhere that you were like 6-6 as a freshman. How did you turn that outstanding freshman season around to be one of the greatest wrestlers ever? Maybe just start with how you got involved with it.
But I believe I was 3-3 as a freshman, but it might have been 6-6. I know I just, I didn't start till my freshman year in high school, and I followed my brother's footsteps, and he was a pretty good varsity wrestler my freshman year, and it was a learning experience. I was 100 and almost 80 pounds in 8th grade, so I was a pretty big kid for a freshman, and wrestling. A lot of juniors and seniors. I was pretty good JV, but the varsity I didn't fare very well at all my freshman year. So turning that around. It just took time and effort. I didn't make it. New Jersey had a kind of a strange system for making it to state. I think at that time it was districts, regionals, and then you went to like almost a super regional, and then the state. Well, I didn't make it to the state until my senior year.
No kidding. Wow. So what about wrestling pulled you in then? Because if you were, of that size, obviously you could have played football. I know you did some shot put, but it seems like wrestling pulled you in. What was it about it?
Well, I think that, I don't know. I just liked it. My brother would, be teaching me this stuff even in 7th and 8th grade when he went out for the team, and I'd go watch him wrestle, and it was just something I seemed to take a liking to and enjoyed. And, then I, as I got older, I got a little better. I mean, my senior year, I was in high school, I was third in the state. By no means what I would say a great, high school career, but pretty good high school career. And it was just something that's intangible, because a lot of people say, oh, you were good your whole life, that's why you like it. Well, I really wasn't good my whole life, so I liked it and fell in love with the sport before I was actually good at it.
That's a common theme of people I talk to on here. The most recent that comes to mind was literally last week. Karen McCoy said the same thing. Fell in love with it way before he was good at it. So how did you end up from New Jersey all the way to Indiana State?
Well, I was recruited by a decent number of schools, not a ton. The ones that stood out was, I think it was either Florida or Florida State. I forget what one down there, and they have obviously since dropped. Penn State, Syracuse, and then Indiana State. I think Trenton State. They were my visits. I wanted to be an industrial arts teacher. My dad was a bus mechanic, and I wanted to work with my hands and, teach, wood shop, mechanical drawing, metal shop, auto shop, stuff like that in high school. And, kind of glad I didn't go into that profession, because a lot of high schools now don't even offer, most of those type of things. But, so it came really down to Trenton State, Penn State, and Indiana State. And Indiana State had the best financial offer and the best industrial arts education. Industrial technology is what they called it, technology education program out of the three. Penn State's program wasn't that great academically, but it was really Trenton State and Indiana State had the two better, academic programs for me. So I decided to go to Indiana State.
Isn't it funny how, back in those days, you couldn't imagine that industrial arts would be discontinued from high schools, but sure enough, it's not even a big program anymore, like you said.
No, but it's morphed over the years. It's become more computerized and technical, and I would almost argue that a lot of those programs have morphed into robotics and stuff like that. So there's still some of that that type of education going on, but not like when we were growing up or I was growing up. Every high school was offering, woods or construction, carpentry course. They were offering some type of metals course, some type of drawing type of course, mechanical drawing, technology or something. So, but, now everything's technology related and computer related.
Right. Yeah, that's true. I guess it probably did just morph into that. And then, I got to ask, was the great Larry Bird at Indiana State at the same time you were there?
Larry Bird was a senior when I was a freshman, and yes, we were there together. He was I will say, an unbelievably hard worker. I mean, he would be in the arena. I would usually lift weights in the morning, 6:30, maybe to 8, and then he would shoot baskets He was usually there every morning when I was leaving, 8 o'clock or so, shooting baskets. And from what I understand, he shot baskets, on his own or with a person for, almost an hour or two, just shooting baskets. So he definitely worked at his craft. And yes, we were there at the same time for a year.
Did you ever interact with him at all, or just through those morning workouts?
Oh yeah, I mean we had the pleasantries and stuff, said hi, but we were not by any means close friends. I mean we there was a mutual respect. We shared some of the same locker room areas over the year, but they over when they were in season, they competed in the Holman Civic Center, which was the big gym on campus. And we always competed and practiced in the arena. So it was, really not in the beginning when we were sharing the same facility. I'm not sure he really knew who I was. I mean, obviously, probably after I started wrestling, but and nobody knew at that time Indiana State was going to have the year it did.
Right. Yeah.
And then during the season, they spent a lot of time over at the Holman Civic Center.
The hype at Indiana State when you were a freshman must have been unreal for that basketball team because, Magic Johnson and Michigan State were just a few hours to the north, and, of course, Larry Bird and Magic would have that great rivalry over the years, but must have been pretty cool.
Oh, it was unbelievable. Arguably that rivalry between Magic Johnson and Larry Bird saved the NBA because they were really faltering at that time. And I think both of the Magic and Larry signed, two of the highest pro sport contracts at the time, I believe. And that I think helped save that rivalry going over the Lakers Celtics rivalry helped save the NBA too, I think. I mean, it was a pretty phenomenal time. In fact, at the same time I was there, Kurt Thomas, a gymnast, was all-around Olympic world champion, and we had a pretty good offensive lineman, Tunch Elkin, who played a lot of years for the Pittsburgh Steelers and still does the radio for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So it was a pretty good time there, that 3 or 4 years at Indiana State in their athletic program.
Who would imagine that Terre Haute, Indiana has one of the greatest basketball players of all time, one of the greatest wrestlers of all time, at the exact same time at the school? It's hard to fathom.
Well, and again, if you go back and look at Kurt Thomas in gymnastics, that's pretty phenomenal too. He was, I bet you he's probably one of the top 20 gymnasts for the U.S. ever. But it was a pretty good run at that particular time.
Man, I guess. And I gotta know, Bruce, when did your mindset switch, or when did it click for you where you said, I'm going to be the absolute best I can? I mean, I know you had some great battles with Lou Bannock in college, at the Midlands, and then at some of the NCAA finals. Like, when did just like this fire go off inside of you? Was it before college, or was it when you got to Indiana State?
Well, I think when I got to Indiana State, my dad sort of challenged me to go out and do my best. And I look at my high school, and I worked hard. I don't want to say I didn't work hard, but in a lot of areas, I really didn't know how to push myself and do my best. And I really didn't know how to focus and goal set and so forth. I had good high school coaching, but I wouldn't say it was great high school coaching. I really didn't know what it took to be your best as a wrestler or as a student, by the way. It was a little bit of that kid academically that did enough to get by. And then in college, I mean, I just think, my dad challenged me, mom challenged me to go out and do your best. And, my college coach, Fran McCann and Willie Williams and Jim Tannehill, those guys instilled in me that, the how to do your best, the work ethic, to doing the extra, it's just not going to practice from 3:30 to 6 o'clock. It's, the eating right, it's the sleeping right, it's the, the extra workouts and so forth. And I think all that combined I started to learn how to work hard. I started to learn how to focus and set goals. So, in about 81, in between the 81, spring and fall, I won the World University Games Championships. And that was in Romania. And I think that's where I really kind of felt I had a shot at maybe being okay internationally. I tried out for the 80 Olympic team, but it was a boycott. And, there were half of the good athletes, not half, a handful of the good athletes never really showed up. So I was alternate to the 80 Olympic team. And I lost a guy named Greg Wojciechowski in the final trials, 6-3 and 8-4. I don't know if I could have never beat him that year. He was pretty good. But, guys like Jimmy Jackson and some of the other, better heavyweights at the time, although Wojciechowski beat a lot of them, but I don't know if I would have beaten him as a sophomore in college or junior in college. So, that's probably 81 is where I finally realized, I might have a shot at doing something okay in the international wrestling.
So that's when it started to click a little bit for you.
Mm-hmm.
And then I know you had some epic battles with Lou Bannock, and in 82 you ended up winning it. Lou got third, and then in 80 you guys wrestled in the finals, and you guys had wrestled previously in the Midlands that year. What do you remember about those battles with you and Lou Bannock from Iowa?
Well, in 81, I beat him, I guess it would be in the 80, trying to think of the right time. I beat him in the 80 Midlands, and then he beat me in the 81 national finals. And then in 82, we actually didn't wrestle. He got beat before the finals, so I wrestled Steve Williams in the finals. But he was a great wrestler, a great guy. Obviously Iowa trained at the time, so he was a grinder. And I was ahead in my junior year, and I did a bad stand-up. He threw a cradle on me and pinned me. But it was a pretty hard-fought battle. I mean, he was, I think at that point, he was maybe a little better trained than I was with some workout partners and stuff, better workout partners. But it was what you say. There were some great battles back then.
No question. I've watched a couple of them, and yeah, you think, he was working out with Mark Johnson, Chris Campbell. He had some elite guys in.
Yeah, his brother. It was some, two brothers for a while, Steve and Ed.
Right. Yeah, at Indiana State, you had some great coaches, and it sounds like they kind of put you on the path where you were going. And then once you graduated, that's when, to me, your career really took off. NCAA champion, of course, is an unbelievable honor, but Bruce, you won 13 world medals. So the NCAA championship kind of pales in comparison to what you did internationally. So after you graduated, did you always know you were going to try and make the Olympics?
Well, yeah, that was my goal. Probably after that World University Game Championships in 81, and I spent a lot of time with Dave Schultz, and, he kind of convinced me that, Bruce, don't go back to, North Jersey or Western or Eastern Pennsylvania and go teach. He says, you need to go, go somewhere, train, try to be an Olympian. And, it started to gel in 81. And, after I won my championships, and I was able to get a graduate assistant down at Oklahoma State University and be a graduate assistant coach and teach in their industrial education department for 2 years. And, it was it was, if you look I won the Tbilisi in 84. 83, I was third in the World Championships. As you said, in 82, Solomon Hasamenkov, picked me up an airplane, spun me. For those listeners, he really looked like Curly in the Three Stooges, by the way.
So this guy, this Soviet, was and that's a kind of a good segue. Is you had some battles with the Soviets, but Hasamikov, 4-time world champ, you wrestled him in the early '80s. I mean, you told me earlier that was like the first guy you wrestled where it was, man, this guy's at a little bit of a higher level at this point, but maybe if you got him later in your career, that wouldn't have been the case.
Right. He was good. And, in Tbilisi before the Olympics in '84, and most of the listeners probably know that in '84, the Soviet Union and the Eastern European bloc countries boycotted the Olympics. But the Tbilisi tournament, which at the time was, all the Russians and most of the better people throughout the world went to the tournament, and I won in '84. I beat most, if not all, the other Russians. But as a side note, Salman Hasamenkov did not wrestle in the Tbilisi in '84 when I won it. Now they did say, they were thinking, because he was, when in '82 when he won, and I'm not sure. I think he won in '83 too. He was, the rumors was he was starting to wear and get old, and some of the other Russians were competing pretty well against him. That's why he didn't go in the Tbilisi tournament. They had already picked him to be the Olympian in '84. He didn't need to go to the Tbilisi tournament or anything. But so when I was training at Oklahoma State, my goal was to win the Olympics, and I was fortunate to do that. But the Eastern European bloc countries weren't there, so I wanted to continue on wrestling, try to win that world championships in the Olympics.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, even though you won in '84, which, Japan was still there. I mean, Japan's obviously much tougher at the lighter weight, so maybe not as relevant for you, but most of the guys who you think would earn medals were not there. I mean, you had to, obviously you knew that at the time. Did it diminish it at all for you, or did you say, shoot, I'm still an Olympic champ, who cares?
Well, I think, the answer is yes and no. When you wrestle or you compete, when you in any sport, in any game, you are there and you compete against whoever is there that tournament, that day, that weekend, that season. In professional football, I'm a Steelers fan, and Ben Roethlisberger's out. So at the world champion, at the Super Bowl, they're not going to say, well, the Pittsburgh Steelers didn't have their great quarterback. That's why somebody else won it. I mean, you compete with whoever's there on that weekend. So that's the mindset I think most of us had. But in reality, when 3 or 4 of the best people in the world at each weight don't show up, it is, you've almost got to put a bit of an asterisk by it. And just like in '80 when the Soviets won, you got to put a little bit of an asterisk by it when Japan and U.S. and some of the other, countries weren't there when we boycotted. So, I would say it probably motivated me a bit more to win the Olympics with all the countries there, because although I felt, because of the Tbilisi and the later World Championship I won in '86, I felt I was more than capable of winning the Olympics, with all the countries there in '84. But the reality is that everybody would second guess that for forever in discussions. So winning in '92 sort of, I don't want to say validated it, but, with all the countries there. In fact, some countries that wouldn't have been there because at that time things were breaking up. So you still had the really, really good Russian, Unified States, Soviet Union type of countries and training system, but some of them at that point were starting to, splinter off into some other countries.
That's such a great point, because as dominant as the Soviet Union was from like 64 to call it 91, I mean, they won every world championship, and their wrestlers won a ton of world championships as well. But as you well know, there were probably 2 to 3 guys at each weight class from Dagestan or Ossetia that could have been there, but just got beat out because it was so tough. So in 92 and onward, a lot of people say it got tougher because now, rather than wrestling one Russian, you had to wrestle the Georgian, you had to wrestle the Bulgarian, you had to wrestle the Russian. So like all of these great guys that formerly would have been under the Soviet Union are now also in that bracket, making it that much tougher.
Right. And I would argue from that 92 to 96 period, they all came through the Soviet system and the system that made the Soviet Union so great. Now there's a lot of different countries, and Dagestan probably is the area of the world that produces maybe some of the greatest wrestlers. And
sure.
But the Soviet system is sort of no longer in place. I mean, Ukraine, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Georgia. I'm trying to think of some of the other
Azerbaijan,
Belarus, Azerbaijan. I mean, they all have their own systems now, as opposed to coming through the quote great Soviet system. So, I mean, there's a lot of great wrestlers out there now, and as were there in back in the 90 through 96, but the Soviet influence I don't think is there anymore.
That makes sense. Especially since it's been broken up that long, but it does seem like
Right.
a lot of the good wrestlers come from that Chechnya region and
Mm-hmm.
Southwest Russia. I guess if you want to call it Russia, they would say otherwise. But
Right.
Did you ever imagine in 1984 that you would wrestle in 3 more Olympics?
No, I took it one year in fact, Dave Schultz and I would joke, oh, this is the last one, we're not. And then, 6 weeks after the Olympics, we're going for the next one. I mean, it was just, he retired a part of time there. You can obviously tell by my conversation, Dave and I had a pretty close relationship, and he was very instrumental in my success over the years. But
how so? If you don't mind me asking, like what?
You never.
What things
Well,
did you pick up from
we
Dave?
roommated together. He kind of would. I would joke, say we'd give each other therapy when we had problems, and we'd talk to each other about a lot of different things, and whine and complain. We were both, married, I think, the same year. We, our wives got along. We, as families, we kind of, there was a lot of times where he and I were roommates, and our wives would hang out together on different trips and so forth. It was a pretty good situation, I think, for both of us, especially as we got older and the rest of the team got younger.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even make that obviously he was on all those teams, but that's sort of the things you always look forward to getting out of these interviews, is something that you can't pick up reading the stats or the interviews. I never knew that you guys were that close.
Well, when you to put things in perspective, and I don't know the exact year, when Les Gutches made the '96 Olympic team, I believe it was. I believe it was '96, was it not? Yeah. In Spokane, he came up to me and said, when you were my idol or something when you were growing up. When I was growing up, when I was like 8 years old, you won your first Olympics, and so you got to realize that I was 36 wrestling when some of the guys in the team were 21, 22, 23. So the 35, I should say. So there was a significant age difference. And I think Dave was actually 6 months or a year older than I was. So when we were in some of those teams in the 90s, we were, 10 plus years older than the other guys.
Right. Hard to, it's kind of like you were the Tom Brady of wrestling. I mean, but you and Dave both way before that even, that was even a thing. 36 is super old to be wrestling in the Olympics.
When, Chris Campbell, he's a great wrestler, awesome guy. I think he medaled when he was 39. I believe. He really worked hard. He came back, but he sat out for a while, and so his body didn't maybe have the wear of doing 15 World Olympic Championships in a row. But he was 39. I still think he's our oldest. But in '96, when I medaled, I was 35 years old. So wow. That's pretty old, because when I won in '92. Ryan, you have to realize people at that time thought I was really old, and I was, 31, almost turning 32. So, I mean,
yeah.
If you look at the history, not many people before Dave Schultz and I wrestled past about 30 or 30, 31.
And what was the financial situation like back in those days? Because now you see a lot of wrestlers saying, hey, I don't have to go to the UFC to make money because the RTCs, they're paying no one's getting rich, let's be clear, but they're paying livable wages. What was it like training for the Olympics in the 80s and 90s in terms of like the financial situation?
Well, I put it in perspective, and training for the '84 Olympics, if somebody wanted to donate money to me to train, they had to donate it to USA Wrestling. And I could only get money if I sent receipts to USA Wrestling to, for if I needed to buy a training piece, or if I, an exercise bike or whatever, I had to go out. We got almost no support from the Olympic Committee then. When Art Martori started to get involved in I always wrestled for the New York Athletic Club, and there was the Athletes in Action, and there was the Hawkeye Club and the Badger Club. There were some other clubs out there. When they started to grow, and then there was small monthly stipends, nothing that could sustain somebody. Then John DuPont came in, who was probably a benefit of wrestling the first couple of years, and then started to really I think mental illness or whatever caused him to do what he did, started to manifest and perpetuate. But when he started, then, there was a little bit more monthly stipends, and that was probably in that, 90-ish area going into 92. But there really wasn't much prize money or any kind, and I mean, like, what I mean by prize money, I think and I have to check the records. I think if you won a gold medal in 96, I think it was 25,000, and silver was maybe 15, and a bronze was 5. I don't remember but that's the only year I remember there being much financial resources. I mean, they had some one-off things in Pittsburgh where they had the super championships where if you won, you could make $2,000 or $3,000. And at that time, that was pretty good, by the way. If you're a assistant wrestling coach or a wrestling coach at Edinburgh University, like I was, because I was assistant wrestling coach full time at Edinburgh from '84 to 90, and then head coach from 90 to 97. So most of my career competing, I was also a head coach at the college, and we had a couple of top 10, or at least one top 10 finish, maybe two, in that time frame. So, it was a different. It was a different time financially. I kind of joke. John Smith won 6 medals, and I think he would have gotten the $250,000 for the first medal, gold medal, and then not sure how it went, but if you add just $250,000 up times 6, that's $1.5 million. But there was some multipliers in there for back to back, so. That would be a total game changer. Even I had 5 medals, that'd be $1 million, and a quarter, not counting the other 8 medals I had. So totally different time frame. And, as president of USA Wrestling, Ryan, I can tell you, we're trying to provide better and better for our athletes, safer environments for them, with the safe sport and the better quality of coaching and more education. But we're also trying to provide for our athletes, elite athletes, so they can make better than what you would, using your word, better than a livable wage. We want them to be able to sustain their success as long as they want to, and not worry, well, I got to get on with life because, making, $25,000, $30,000, $40,000 a year, being a world champion. That's kind of ancient history. I mean, we didn't make that back when I was wrestling, but now again, I think it's $250,000 if you win an Olympic gold medal. So there's some incentive right there.
I didn't realize it was that much. That's incredible.
I think it is. I mean, you'd have to do the research, but
Sure.
it's a decent amount of money. Yes.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, you think about a lot of I think the elite wrestlers have stayed in wrestling, but some of those not mid-tier, I'm talking like number 3, 4, 5 on the ladder. Maybe they've gone on to UFC a little bit early just because of the financial rewards. And, you look at the UFC champs, I think 8 of the 10 or 8 of the 9 are wrestlers. So obviously it works and they're making good money, but that's a whole other level of damage they're taking in terms of the head trauma and that kind of thing.
I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how, and I'm sure that the UFC or MMA community is going to, keep a close eye on the concussion and the durability and what happens to these fighters, when they're 50, 60, 70 years old. Some of the groundbreaking people, and I would say Randy Couture, who was a great amateur wrestler and just a great guy, gives back to the sport. They didn't get into the UFC or the MMA till later on in life. But, so I don't think they're as good as an example as, some of these kids that are in college or in high school starting that sport. And what's that going to look like when a kid who started at 21, 22, what are they going to look at, if they have a career into their 30s or later, or early 40s, some of those guys go to, like, let's say, 40, and then what are their bodies and minds going to be at 50 or 60 years old? I mean, that's going to be the true study, and we won't know that for another 10 or more years.
Right. Yeah, there's just not enough body evidence for that. Now, before we go back to your career, I got to ask real quick, how close are we, if at all, to getting 10 weight classes back at the Olympics? Not for 2020, but for subsequent Olympics.
Well, I think that's going to be a hard thing to call. There's a lot of moving parts and a lot of things that happen within the Olympic Committee, both internationally and our international federation, which is UWW. And it'd be almost impossible to predict. I know that's what most people want in the sport of wrestling, but I think it comes down to finances, adding all the sports and trying to be totally equitable in the financial burden of hosting a Olympics on a host site is astronomical. Well, if you have 4 more weights times, whatever the number of competitors, if it stays at 16 or 10, it just continues to add to the amount of issues at the Olympics. And I think that's why the UWW has broken off, although I think there's some advantages and some disadvantages to having 10 weight classes during the World Championships and then the 6 Olympic weight classes. But, it's rough in that transition year because the U.S. is going to have some dilemmas. We have some awesome wrestlers. We have probably 10 really good wrestlers on the team last year, and we only have 6 spots in Tokyo. So I think when you look at that, Ryan, it would be almost impossible to predict the likelihood of that. If I was a betting man, I would probably say wrestling would do that in a heartbeat. I don't know that the International Olympic Committee, if that will ever fly. I think there's just some financial dynamics against that that I don't know that are overcomable.
Yeah, I didn't really think about the financial impact, but then as you were saying that, I'm thinking, all right, well, if they cut the 2/3 and just make it a true third, maybe that's less of the medals or less of the people. But I mean, obviously, it's way above my pay grade, and you would know the politics and intricacies of that. Yeah, it is just unfortunate to think about at our upper weights how many guys are not going to be going to the Olympics who are world level athletes.
Right. I mean, we have, when you look at our team we put out in Paris and our team we had in, I'll say Paris, Budapest, and Kazakhstan. I mean, almost every one of those folks, we had 10 great wrestlers, and you look, there's only going to be 6 in Tokyo. So it's simple math. We're going to leave, 4 people that were on a world championship team home. And then that's not saying some of our weight classes in the United States, we're 2 and 3 and 4 deep, that people that could medal. So it's going to be some interesting trials starting here in December down in Fort Worth, and then a couple of different trial tournaments, and then obviously State College in the beginning of April. I mean, there's going to be some great matches. Yeah, this weekend is
Bill Farrell.
Yeah, Bill Farrell in New York. So
right. And that's to qualify for the trials as well. So before we let you go, I got to spend maybe 10 minutes just talking about your epic rivalry with David Gobedjishvili. How many times? Let's just start here. How many times did you guys wrestle?
I believe we wrestled approximately 16 times.
Oh my God. Okay, so this gentleman from the Soviet Union, 2-time world champ, Olympic champ in '88, and you guys wrestled in the '88 Olympic finals, and then in the '92 Olympic finals, you won in '92.
Well, not in the finals. In '92, I wrestled him in the pool round. Myself, David Gobedjishvili, and Andre Schroeder. And Schroeder had won the world championships and was probably, if you go back, he's a 4 or 5-time world medalist. We were all in the same half. So I wrestled. I wrestled those guys to get into finals against Jeff Toohey, who was a Canadian who was 3rd in the world the year before.
Okay, gotcha. That is what a side of the bracket. I mean, that's obviously they weren't seeding it back then. So, did you first run into this gentleman at the Tbilisi tournament, or when was the first time you remember wrestling Gobedjishvili?
Well, I believe the first time I wrestled him was in the dual meet in the Soviet Union. I want to say about '85, and then I think he had beaten me there. He had beaten me there. He had beaten me in a world championships. I forget what one. He had beaten me in with the world championships. It was in Tokyo, '90. He beat me in '80 Olympics in '88, world championships in Tokyo in '90. A dual meet, and he beat me one other time. He's beaten me 4 times. I believe I've beaten him in a world championships. I've beaten him in the Olympics. I think he was in one of the Tbilisi tournaments, and then we wrestled about 5 or 6 other times in World Cups and dual meets, and there was a really epic dual meet in the Fiesta Bowl of wrestling was with the Fiesta Bowl. I think it was in '88 or '89. I beat him in that. And the reason why I remember that so well is we just did a thing for Bobby Douglas at the Hall of Fame, honoring him at the Dan Gable Museum and Hall of Fame in Iowa. And we were talking about that meet in Arizona when he was down there. That was in Arizona, the Fiesta Bowl of wrestling. And then the day or two later was the Fiesta Bowl football tournament, football bowl game. So I beat him quite a bit, more than he did. Now he beat me, in an Olympics and the World Championships were two premier events, and I believe I beat him in 2 premier events.
Yeah, no, that's what I have here. And what's interesting is when you wrestle someone like that many times, I always wonder if that's someone where you were training solely for him, or if you were just kind of training as you were, and if you happen to wrestle him, so be it.
Well, there was a point in my career is that there were really only about 3 people I would ever really, different time. It was usually the Soviet or the Russian, the Iranian, and maybe the Turk, depending on what year it was. So, you weren't really training at my level or during that time for the guy from Hungary. You had to respect them, but you weren't doing a lot of film on those guys. But you really studied the film on, Schroeder, the German, the Iranian, the couple of different Iranians I wrestled, the couple of different Turks, the Russian, even the Georgian one a little bit later on. But there wasn't like, and you got to realize some of the times in the World Championships back then, there was no qualifying, not like today. So there were literally 30, there might have been 30 people in a weight class. Mm-hmm. But, I wrestled a guy from the island of Mauritius, and, they were pretty bad.
Yeah, I mean, at that level, I can't even imagine. When I say I can't imagine, it's because you went 17 years without losing to someone from the U.S. So you're talking about, world-class performer at the top level, going against other world-class performers. And like when you were going into the Olympics in 92, knowing that you had some absolute battles with this guy, like you said, you beat him, or you won in 86, he beat you in 88, in 90, he won. But in 92, going into it, knowing, the morning of that tournament, knowing that you have all these guys in your side of the bracket, where were you at mentally? And did you do any type of visualization to get yourself ready?
Well, yeah, I was, I did some affirmations and positive thoughts, but I didn't focus on the mental as much as the physical. And I'll say this, that, if you look at my history in 91, I didn't do very well. So I had a little bit of something to prove in 92. 91, I did not medal. That was, I think I had 8 straight, had a break, and then 5 more straight. But, I was well trained. I was focused. I mean, it was definitely a, quality. The tournament I was focusing on the most.
Yeah. So you did some of the affirmations, though? I mean, do you remember what they were back then?
Just positive thought. I mean, there wasn't, again, we didn't have some of the scientific training. We didn't have the psychologists, the sports psychologists helping us near as much back then as they do now.
Yeah, it's...
You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, absolutely. And so it was more so just positive affirmations. And then, I mean, when we're like 5 minutes out from a match, were you going through your routine of what you would do, or are you trying to be as calm and just kind of as loose as possible?
Oh, I had a pretty constant routine, Ryan. I mean, I definitely did the same things over and over, and just an on top of it routine. I was very from a couple of days out in my training, from a couple of days out, eating, training, resting. I tried to do, the same thing and routine over and over. And I was pretty religious about that. I was, the warm up, the drill partners, the corner coaches, all those things were very planned, calculated. I don't know if they were, they worked for me, obviously, but, in today's much more scientific method, I don't know if they would hold up and be good. But again, for me, it was awesome.
Yeah.
It was, I had, guys like Bill Wick and Greg Strobel in my corner, and, Bruce Burnett and just a ton of different coaches, head coaches and stuff. And we put together a good plan for me, and it worked. And, visualization, positive thought was all part of that game.
Man, and obviously it worked. 13 world medals, 5 world championships, 2 Olympics, and 5 world level medals, 2 Olympic gold medals, and 3 world gold medals. Just unbelievable stats. And I'll just say, Bruce, it's been an honor to chat with you, and I hope to have you back on because there's a ton of stuff here we didn't even get to. But the last thing I'll say as we sign off is same question we ask everyone. It seems kind of silly asking you how wrestling changed your life because it was your job and it's been your life. But maybe what things do you take away from the sport, or what has it taught you that you still take with you to this day in your career?
Well, Ryan, I think wrestling had changed my life because when I look at when I was in high school, I wanted to be a bus mechanic like my dad was, and a mechanic and work with my hands. Then I'll go to college and I'll be a teacher. And as it turned out, because of wrestling, I was able to be a wrestler. I was, able to coach wrestling at Edinburgh University for about 13 years. I was the athletic director for 10 at Edinburgh, and working as assistant vice president for advancement at Edinburgh University. And I think it changed my career path, quite frankly, for the better. Not that teaching wouldn't have been good, but I was able to help young men in wrestling as I would have been able to help young, people in teaching. But, and I'm at a position now where as president of USA Wrestling, I can get back to the sport. So it really did change my career path significantly. And I look at that and very thankful for it. And, I think wrestling is a great life lesson sport. And I think when you have to be a team player and have to have good workout partners and have to surround yourself with good people, but it also teaches you when you're on that mat, when it's you against the other person, I think you have to really, you have to own up and take responsibilities for your wins and your losses. And I think that, wrestling has taught me many life lessons, and as I do clinics and speaking engagements and my work with USA Wrestling, hopefully, as a volunteer board member with USA Wrestling, hopefully you're giving back.
And all great things must come to an end. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, give us a review, give us a rating, and share this with your friends. It would mean the world to us. Thanks for listening to Wrestling Changed My Life.